Okay, good evening. And welcome everybody to the State of the Town. I'm Krista McNamara, your town clerk. Today's Monday, December 9th. We have a quorum with 64 members present. Before I hand it over to your moderator, Seth Morton, I'd like to introduce our newest members of the RTM who have been introduced and appointed by the respective caucuses. So if you don't mind, when I call your name, if you would please rise. Let's hold all our applause, as we did before, to the very end, and then I'll give you the recap of where we still have some openings. So, starting in District 3, Paul Ferrone, Cindy Torres, and Stephen Walker. In District 4, Dan Coonan, Jennifer Klein, Dan Noble, Per Seska, and Morgan Whittier. Welcoming back to the RTM. And District 6, Lori Edelman, Violet Aldea, Joseph Bartning, Janine Duarte Bartning, and Michael Carrero. I'm sorry if I got that one wrong. All right, very much. Welcome all to the RTM. Okay, now, last but not least, as you're going about the holidays and visiting with friends around town, and for those of you tuning in on TV 79, if you're a resident in District 3, there are 3 openings that will remain, and they would love to meet with you to talk about the opportunity. In District 4, we have 1 opening. In District 5, I have you, Erica, there are 2 openings. We have 100% enrollment in all the other districts. So keep spreading the word. We'll see if we can get to 100 before the end of the session. So upon further ado, I'll introduce you now, Seth Morton, your moderator.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to State of the Town. Just one quick administrative announcement for you. We have on our presentation screens closed captioning, and that is a new feature, and I think probably one that you'll all appreciate, particularly if the mics aren't working awfully well. You'll be able to see that, and that's a result of work by Lois Schneider, who heads up the Technology Committee of the Rules Committee. And the incessant Mike Wheeler, who is a technology guy and doesn't give up until it happens. So, thank you, Michael. So without objection tonight, I'll accept the agenda. Any objection? And then I'll take a motion to approve the minutes of the November 12th meeting. A second, please. There we go, thank you. Any corrections, additions, deletions? I hear none, see none. If you think of some later, get them to the town clerk. So we're ready to vote. All in favor of approving the minutes of November 12, say aye. Aye. Opposed? I hear none. Abstentions? I see none. The minutes of November 12 are approved. Next item is appointing a new member of the RTM for consideration to the Blight Commission for a term beginning January 1st. We have 1 nominee through the town clerk, Jim Cameron. Can I have a second, please? Thank you. And then, are there any other nominations? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of appointing Jim Cameron as our nominee to the Blight Commission, say aye. Aye. Opposed? I hear none. Abstentions, I hear none. Jim? Great. Next is item 24-42, approve the supplemental special appropriation in the amount of $625,000 for the repair of Gorham's Pond Dam. Speaking on behalf of the Finance and Budget Committee, Jack Davis.
I apologize, this is a little longer than I wanted it to be because I know the real show is happening afterwards. I'm Jack Davis, District 3, RTM Finance and Budget Committee Chair. I move 2442, resolution to amend the resolution adopted on September 23rd, 2024, appropriating $3,345,900 for costs to repair Gorham's Pond Dam, and authorizing the issuance of bonds and notes in the amount of $3,345,900 to meet said appropriation, to increase the appropriation and bond authorization by $625,000 to $3,979,900. Do I have a second? Did you get that? Good. If there's no objection, I'll waive the reading of the resolution. As stated in the title of this resolution, the resolution is amending Resolution 2433, approved by the RTM on September 23, 2024, by increasing the appropriation and bond authorization by $625,000 for a new total of $3,979,900. As there are new members since the original resolution was passed, I will revisit some of the original F&B Finance and Budget reports so all members are up to date, and I apologize to those who have previously heard this report. A brief background: the Gorham Pond Dam lease was executed about 100 years ago. It has since expired. Discussion of surviving parties to the lease can be addressed in other reports or by Town Council. The key aspect to be discussed tonight is that the opinion of Town Council, the town is still responsible for the work to be completed under the terms of the lease. On September 1st, 2021, Storm Ida hit the Gorham Ponds Dam, causing damage, necessitating extensive repairs. The town constructed emergency repairs with deep permit. The town then initiated and filed applications with FEMA and permitting through the deep for final repair. This project could receive 100% reimbursement from FEMA. To receive any reimbursement, the project must be completed by October 2025. All invoices need to be paid and submitted. That being said, this is FEMA. It could take us 2 to 4 years before we're going to see any of that reimbursement. Regarding the funding of this project, the town could issue bond anticipation notes in the first 2 years to cover the costs awaiting the FEMA reimbursement. If the funds are received in this time frame, the reimbursement will offset the cost, and the bond authorization, or that part authorized but not issued, will be removed from the outstanding authorizations. If the Board of Finance decides to bond prior to receiving any of the FEMA reimbursement, upon receipt of FEMA funds subsequently, those funds received relating to this project would go into the town's bond fund and could be used instead of future bonding for another authorized appropriation and bonding project that has been approved by the Board of Finance and this RTM. So what happened here? Upon performing a review of the scheduled values as part of the contractor's due diligence, it was discovered that one of the bid items' quantities was underestimated. Specifically, bid item 14, mortared stone masonry wall construction, was estimated at 209 square feet instead of 209 cubic yards. This error was created by the consultant hired by the town to create the RFP. The price for this item is $430 per square feet. The square feet estimated to be 1,650. An additional approximately 12 feet was added for contingency. That's less than 1%. So that brought the total up to $625,000. It should be noted that the final usage of the mortared stone masonry wall construction will be measured by the town in the field, and the town will incur only the cost for the measured amount. In addition, the increase in this appropriation will be eligible for FEMA reimbursement. The Board of Selectmen approved this amendment, as did the Board of Finance in their November meetings. The RTM Finance and Budget Committee voted unanimously to approve this increase to the original appropriation and bond authorization and recommends the same to the full RTM. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Are there any other committees which wish to report? Any comments from the floor? RTM? Yes, Liz Bacon. Try. No, it sounds like it's not on. Or it doesn't sound, doesn't it? How's that in the, yeah, I'm getting.
Is that better?
Yes, there you are.
Like $600,000, this is like a 20% increase. Who was this consultant? Are they taking any responsibility for this error? Are they reimbursing us or compensating us in any way for the error that they made?
Thank you for the question. Anybody like to do, Jack?
I can give a preliminary answer, and if you don't like what I have to say, Ed is in the back, but let's keep him there. This hasn't cost us anything. Had the cubic yards been put into the original bid, this is the cost of what the project would have been. So there's no additional outlay. We're just correcting what the project is to what the original cost should have been. And it hasn't delayed us any work. We're going to be starting in December, which the contractor had held us for. And again, the final amount will be measured and we'll pay the final thing. But there's no out-of-pocket incremental cost in this. It's just that it was human error, and it was caught. So as to whether or not what happens with that consultant if he does the next RFP, that's up to Ed and the department.
Yes. Come to the mic, please. Name and district.
Thank you. Violet Aldea from District 6. My question is, do we have an idea of what future budget or expenses we might have from Gorham Pond? Do we anticipate any future expenses in terms of maintaining Gorham Pond?
I would say that there's normal maintenance that does go on there that we're responsible for. I do want to add one other thing to the prior answer. We are anticipating to get 100% reimbursement, so the fact that this went up by $625,000 is just that the federal government should be giving us back another $625,000. So that's an important aspect. This isn't that this is out of the eligibility for FEMA. There is normal operations that we do in maintenance, but that's just to live up to that part of the lease that we're still responsible for maintaining.
Priscilla,
Oh, yes?
yeah, Priscilla Wong, District 1. Have we already made the application to FEMA, and was it with the old number? Or?
No, this is beyond my pay grade, so I may ask Ed to come up here and answer that. Ed, do you want to respond to? The application to FEMA is just stating what.
Jack to.
Yeah. The application to FEMA was just stating that we had damage and that would be covered. We will be submitting the bills to them throughout the process, which is the normal case of what you do with the government. And then everything, when its government is completed, the final amount will be submitted to it. So we didn't go out to FEMA and say, oh, we think this is going to cost you $1 million. We said, this is the problem. And they said, okay, you get 100%. They haven't even guaranteed 100%, but yes, this is eligible for 100% reimbursement. Then they'll come out, they'll do inspections throughout the project, and at the end, we'll find out how much we're getting. Did that do okay? Thank you.
Other questions? Questions from electors of, I see no more from the RTM. Questions, electors of the town? I see none. Looks like we're ready to vote. All those in favor, please rise. Jesus. I want to show them that despite my demeanor. Okay, no votes, please. No votes, please. And abstentions? Okay. Please get the votes into Krista. Everybody in? Okay. Now we'll begin the State of the Town presentations. Speaking first, the first selectman of the town of Darien, John Zagrodzky.
Okay, I am a child of the 20th century. Let's see if we can get this to work. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. I'm glad to be here this evening and to address you and give you a sense of the state of the town from where I sit. I've got a few topics I would like to cover. I'll have some general comments on the town, and then I want to talk about a couple of our major projects, Henley Holmes Royal, as well as Great Island, and I've got a few other updates. And looking ahead to a few things that are coming, and then there are some folks that deserve some thank yous. So before I get started, the RTM recently had some technology upgrades, these wonderful microphones, and I think they've installed an oxygen system, so if these presentations get particularly boring, I think that'll drop out of the ceiling and help you, although I don't think my presentation is going to be boring. I think the ones that are very numbers intensive and the Board of Finance could be extremely boring, and well, I'm not going to mention anyone by name, but his initials are Jim Palin, and so, okay. So let's talk about a couple of things for the state of the town, and it's both what I think are some positives and then some concerns that I have that a number of you have also expressed. And let's touch on a few of these. So the first one, just in terms of positives, I think we really just have to start with our schools. Jill is going to talk about that from her perspective, but I really think that it's worth highlighting on my part because we have excellent communication between the town and the Board of Education. And I can't stress how important that is, because even though the town doesn't directly manage the schools, that's the purview of the Board of Education. The fact that we're in constant communication means that we're all coordinated, we all have the same messaging, we both understand each other, and it really helps, I think, the Board of Education to have the rest of the town tuned in like it is, and it's something that I think has made a big difference. Another contributing factor is just the outstanding talent that we have managing our schools. That ranges from not just the Board of Education, but from the superintendent straight down. We have excellent, outstanding faculty and staff that are running these schools, and we should be happy about that. We should also be happy about the volunteers that support all that. I think practically every parent and anyone who's got anything to do with the schools has some volunteer capacity with schools in this town, and it's just amazing. I don't know if any of you know Michelle Seeney, John Seeney's wife, and you see the amount of work that that woman does to support the football program at Darien High School. Just having a chance to watch her in action is really just amazing. But it's just an example of the gold standard that we have for volunteers in this town. And that's one of the things that I think makes this place magical, and you can see the impact of that on our schools. So I think the next thing to talk about a little bit is property values. That's also a good news story, and there's a few facts that we'll run through tonight. So the first thing is that in terms of trends, you'll see at the top of this chart a trend in number of houses closed. So that's the number of private residences that actually sell in the years shown, and this is just the first 11 months of each year that I have on this chart. And what you see is about a 55% decline in sales since 2021, and that's a combination of factors. One, folks wanting to keep their low interest mortgages, but also two, I think, because frankly a lot of people like to live in Darien. We don't have people leaving town, and as a result, there aren't that many properties being sold and being listed for that matter. If you look at the bottom right-hand side of that chart, we have, as of November 2024, 20 listings for sale in this town. We only have 8 of them for houses that are below $2 million. 8 houses for sale out of a town of 22,000 people and probably 7,000 residents. That's it, right? So in one way, that's bad news, because people who want to move to town, it's kind of slim pickings, right? But on the other hand, it's good news for current owners, right? You can see how prices have behaved just since last year, up 26% for the average sale price, and up 16% on a price per square foot basis. And so the message I would have is, if you're long real estate, it's good for you, and a good thing, I think, for our town, and good for all of us. Another area to talk a little bit about are developments. Kind of an obvious point, but if you look around and see all of the commercial developments that we have here in town, it really is amazing. We have far more real, what I would call retail options in town, not just stores, but restaurants. Think about what this place was like 10 years ago, and just go out and look at any one of these new developments that we have today. It is an astounding transformation. I get that at some point that's a lot to take in, but I think if you look at not just what we have, but the care and quality that builders and developers like the Vaccaros, David Genovese, and others have taken with those properties, I think we can all say that we could retire for the amount of money we're spending at places like 1020, right? It's an amazing set of options that we have now that we just did not have just 10 years ago, and I think that's something that we should be excited and happy about. Another important aspect of those developments, though, is that I went out and met with the Vaccaros over at the Heights Crossing that's looking pretty sharp over by Palmer's, if you've been there. One of the things he said was that the general strategy is to put that retail on the first floor and then have apartments above that. And what they're trying to do is to mimic the experience that you would get in New York City, right? Because folks are used to retail on the ground floor, and then they live above that. And when they leave their apartments, they got places to go and places to shop. And he's trying to replicate that there, as other developers have. And so it's a great way to incorporate apartments into our town. Further to that, these developers, all but one that I'm aware of, for one small complex, are incorporating affordable housing into their developments. 14% of those apartments that are being created are deemed affordable. And so it's good that we have this development, but it's also good that we're sending a message to Hartford that Darien is doing its part for affordable housing in that crisis that we have in this state. And I think we actually set an example for a lot of other towns because of what we've been able to do in that regard. I'd like to also talk another thing about sense of community and volunteer spirit. I don't know about you, but go out practically any weekend, or certainly in any month, how many different things you can participate in, from parties and events to town-sponsored programs to private interests and businesses having something that you can participate in. It really is something. And just a sampling from these pictures here of things that we've seen that just give you a sense of community in this town and a sense of how great it is to live here. I mean, whether it was the old-fashioned Christmas this past weekend, which had a huge attendance, and an ice sculptor with a chainsaw. I don't know if you all saw that. I'd never actually seen one of those being done. It was very cool to seeing Chief Anderson retire and hand over the reins to Chief Marin and all the celebrations that were there for that, to the Oktoberfest that was over at the Garden Center, to the Stanley Cup when it came to town this past summer. If you had a chance to go to any of those things, where are you going to find community spirit like that? I mean, wasn't that terrific? Go to those things. I promise you, if you've had a down day, you will feel better after you go to that, because it's a lot of fun to see that, and it's a lot of fun to go there and be there with other people. And I think as a town, whether it's the town programs or it's volunteers or it's businesses or residents, we all do an excellent job at pulling those things together, and you should feel really good about that. I certainly do every time I go to one, and I think they're absolutely terrific. So let's touch now on some concerns that I have that I think many of you share with me. So I think really at the top of the list has to be mental health. We have had a period of time where there have been no serious tragedies in this town, but it wasn't that long ago that we in fact had some of those. And I think it's very important that we keep that front and center, not just thinking about it from a town standpoint, but thinking about it in terms of our friends and neighbors, people who might be in need or in trouble, or even frankly for yourself or for your own family. There is no shame, none whatsoever, in admitting that you have a problem, in reaching out to somebody to get help from others. No shame whatsoever. We need to make sure we communicate that to friends, family, schools, everything. I know the school system and Dr. Hadley's and others are absolutely on top of this for the children there, but this is a problem that extends beyond children and extends to adults, and we should be mindful of the needs of other people. I had a chance recently to take the mental health first aid program that's offered by the social services in the town, and Allie Ramstack, who leads that effort. I have to tell you, that was eye-opening. I learned some things that I didn't know. I thought, for example, that it was very hard to detect in someone whether they would have a problem, and that many times it was just a surprise. That's wrong, right? There's a lot that you can do to see where others are standing and try to come up with some way to help them in a first aid capacity. So I would urge you, if you're interested, to look into that program and consider taking it yourself. I stood corrected on a number of things, and I'm a lot better at thinking about that thanks to that quality program. So do that if you have a chance. I'll thank also finally on that our mental health task force. I know Marcy Minnick participates in that, and it's an excellent forum for discussing these issues and keeping them in the forefront, but also helping us leverage best practice in other towns and in other places so that we're doing the most we can in this area of trouble. So next up, I think everybody's worried a bit about infrastructure and traffic. It's something that comes up pretty frequently, and if we think about just some recent examples, you'll recall that we had this broken sewer line down at Weed Beach just recently. That was really quite the scene to see that, by the way, and I have to just do a shout out. I don't know if you all followed this on social media, but so the pipe breaks, right? This is a sewer line that carries about 2/3 of the sewage out of Darien for treatment in Stamford. This was a non-trivial problem, okay? Within an hour and a half of when that happened, several companies with whom Public Works and Ed Gentile have contractual arrangements showed up on site. And I mean, they were here in force. They had giant vehicles. They had these huge vacuum trucks. The Public Works team was able to cordon off an area where the sewage was leaking, and those vacuum trucks would take it out and over to Stamford so that it could be treated. None of that spilled into our stormwater system, not into Long Island Sound, not into our residential community at all, and there was more than 100,000 gallons worth of sewage that spilled. That is a great testament to the sorts of things we have behind the scenes that you just do not see, right, with things like Public Works that keep us all out of trouble, and I'm just very impressed with all that. As impressive as that was, it's a reminder that these are old systems. This is not like a new community that was just built. This stuff is really old, and we're going to continue to have problems like that, despite our best investments this year, just more than $5.3 million that we're spending on upgrading and renewing our sewage treatment or sewage transit systems, we're still going to be dealing with an old system for a very long time. And so just be mindful of that when you see that. In terms of other infrastructure, we have a couple of flooding projects in process. I'm going to be talking about that separately at another time. But anybody remember that storm that came through in August? Right? So that storm was a 1,000-year storm, okay? And it came across Connecticut, and it was about 30 or 40 miles north of us. As much as we would want to invest in storm systems, let me tell you right now, if that storm had come through Darien, Connecticut, there is nothing we could have invested to have helped us with that. That was a devastating storm. I sit on the board of the Region 1 DEMIS, which is the Department of Emergency Management and Homeland Security for the state, and to sit in those meetings and listen to the devastation and see the photographs of what happened up there, thank God that that did not come our way. But everybody needs to be mindful that that could absolutely happen here. Now, we're going to continue to make as much progress as we can on our flood-related infrastructure, but there is a point where there is no amount of money we could reasonably pay that would fully insulate us from things like that, which is why I have the point up there about this notion of individual resilience. I remember a while back during the summer 21 storms, I was talking to a neighbor who got his basement flooded. And I had noticed that the water had come around and had gone in through his garage, which was not really kind of sealed. And I said, so what would have happened if you'd had some sandbags or those water things that you fill up there? What if you'd had that sort of blocking that off? He said, well, actually, I would have had no water. That's an interesting point. I would urge everybody here to not just track what we're doing in terms of flooding projects, but think about your own business. Think about your own residents. Is there something that you could do to make it a little bit more resilient? I think that's something we should all consider. I certainly am going to do that for my own account. Traffic is also worth mentioning. These are a couple of pictures from the post road. We had bad traffic in the middle of the day here, let alone traffic on the weekends. Has anybody had an experience where it takes 25 minutes to drive across the town of Darien because you're sitting in traffic? You know what I'm talking about. We've had this problem for a long time. Sitting in my office is a copy of this, which is indicative that we have been wrestling with problems of traffic on the post road since God was a boy, a long time. The reality is the post road is not something we can reasonably expand. You'll note that despite decades of problems with trucks going under that bridge at the Darien train station, the height of that bridge remains the same. We cannot easily fix this, and those roads are all controlled by the state. It's a state road. And there's not a lot we can change in terms of capacity on the post road. Maybe in some other areas in town, we're going to try to get a lot smarter on things like that. For example, you note that everybody really was upset and worried about traffic by Whole Foods. When they put in Whole Foods, oh my God, traffic's going to be terrible. They did engineering on that, and now around the Whole Foods, there's really no traffic problem over there. Same with what they're going to do at Heights Road and Hollow Tree Ridge, where the Heights crossing, that's going to go in. Look at West Road and Noroton when they put in those left turn lanes. Didn't that make a difference? Have some confidence that we can't solve all our traffic problems, but in terms of engineering and technology, the people who are working on this are really, really good, and I think we'll continue to kind of keep these traffic problems at bay. So I want to talk a little bit about tensions. So when I talk about tensions here in town, it's interesting to think about that we are always having arguments about something. Nature preservation versus development, trees versus sidewalks, dogs or no dogs on Great Island, which flags to fly at Town Hall, new buildings versus keeping things as they are. This tension is healthy and normal, and it actually says that we're all paying attention, that we all care about these things. We all have a point of view about how we think those things should be done. And that's a good thing, but it is also the single source in town, and let's be mindful of this, of incivility. I've watched too many times where there's an argument or a discussion about something where somebody gets pissed off and there's a shouting match. That does not speak well of us as a town. It does not set an example to kids who might be watching that. And so I want you to remember that anytime you get into a heated discussion with somebody in town or one of your colleagues about some issue. I was at a conference last week and I had a chance to sit down and speak at some length with Harry Rilling. So Harry is the mayor of Norwalk, and I didn't really know him. So you talk about long service. This guy had been 41 years in the Norwalk Police Department, 17 years as chief, retired from that, and he's now been mayor for 12 years. I think he's immortal. But he's a very good man, and we were talking about incivility, and We mentioned the golden rule, right? Treat others as you would like to be treated yourself. And he said, actually, I have a slightly different rule, which I give to police officers when they were being recruited. And he called it the platinum rule. And he says, imagine if you see an officer, and if that officer had pulled over your child, your spouse, your parent, how would you like that officer to treat that person? And he says, that's the platinum standard. So that's the Harry Rilling standard, and frankly, I think that's what we should adopt here. I asked him if I could plagiarize that since I'm no longer in school, and he said yes. So please think about that in terms of what you could do to promote and preserve civility here in town. I want to talk a little bit about crime reports. That's something that comes up with some frequency, and we are certainly familiar with some of the issues that we have to deal with there. So it is unfortunate that we've got crime in this town. It's not something that's particularly new. We might be seeing a little bit more of it, but I think our police, they certainly have a handle on all of this, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But I remind everybody there's more that we could do ourselves. So think about these things. These things are not things that we have never spoken about. Lock your cars. Lock your home if you're going to be away. Use your alarm on your cars or your home, and don't leave valuables so that they're visible, right? Another thing that comes up that's crime related is this notion of where do you get information about what happened, right? This is actually a pretty important point, and I want to stress this, that people should be getting their information as much as possible from official sources. We've had some issues with this because people are relying on social media or unreliable sources for the information that they're getting when there are reports of crime. So everybody's heard about this issue where there was a man in a car pulled over, and apparently a child in elementary school walking there, and everyone was worried that the guy was rolling down the window talking to this kid. So none of that, as far as I know, and there's been no arrest or no evidence that that actually happened. But boy, did that take on a life of its own, right? This almost turned into a frenzy. We had one report where the person being reported, it was targeted, said, well, here's another person doing exactly the same thing. It was an Uber Eats driver trying to drop off a meal for someone. And so my point is that these things can spin out of control. And when you see those things, take a moment and say, wait a minute, where am I getting my information on that? What could I do to get official confirmation? Police department and Chief Marin are very, very good at trying to get that information out. If you're concerned about it, check them out on social media. They're very good at making sure the public knows what's going on through that vehicle. They're also very good at taking your call. If you've got a question, give the police department a call and they'll fill you in on that. But please keep that in mind when you're hearing about these things. The other thing I want to mention is this notion of letting the professionals do their job. I happened to be teaching a class at the high school on the day that we had this shelter in place. And the shelter in place came about, which you've read, which there were some potential threats that a student had made. And anyway, it all cleared up. There was no problem. But word gets out that that was happening. In fact, some kids were on their phones in that same classroom and had gotten word just before I got a word through my official contacts. It goes out that fast. And when that word goes out, it went out to all the parents. And I looked out the window, and there were police cars coming around to the high school, again, just to protect us all. And there were some civilian cars, and I thought, well, boy, detectives in unmarked vehicles, they're showing up as well. They were parents. We had parents 60 miles an hour going around that track to get over to the high school because they heard something was going on. I heard subsequently that there were parents that were calling and saying, well, we're out of town. We'll fly into town right away because this is clearly an emergency. It is entirely possible to overreact like that. And if everybody did that at once, these facilities would be overwhelmed, our emergency responders would be unable to respond, and people would be put in real danger. As hard as it is, I would urge you to please let the professionals do their job in these cases. Since I've been in this office for now more than a year, I've had a chance to really get to know our police department and the security-minded professionals that we have here in town. I'm telling you right now, we are served by top-tier professionals. You need to let them do their job. And when something like that happens, you should stay informed, you should be responsible, but please let those professionals come in and take care of that situation. We'll be well served by letting them do that. All right, it's time to spend some time on everybody's favorite topic. We need to talk about locking cars. I don't know what we need to do to make this happen in this town, but every time I hear, I will go ask the police and I will say, Chief, for the car thefts this month, what percentage of the car thefts were unlocked with the keys inside? The answer is 100%. 100% of these cars that are being stolen are unlocked with the keys in the vehicle. I don't know what to say. Anybody hear the joke about the two guys? They're out hiking in the woods, and one of them sees this bear coming and chasing after them, right? And the first one starts to run away, and he looks over at the other one's reached down to his backpack, and he's putting on his running shoes. The guy says, look, this bear's coming. He says, how could you not be running from the bear? He says, dude, I don't have to outrun the bear. I only have to outrun you. The reason I bring up that story is because by leaving cars unlocked, we're creating a reputation in the criminal community that Darien is the place to come in and steal these vehicles. If you think that word doesn't get out, you would be wrong, right? What would happen if we got religious about this, where people said, I'm going to lock this stuff up? Word goes out that this place is locked up like Fort Knox. They go to some other place to do what they do. So I don't know what additional campaigning we need to do to try to remind people of this. There was one family that has had four vehicles stolen out of their driveway because they left the keys in the vehicle unlocked. 4. I don't know what more we can do, but that's something that I think everybody needs to just recheck. And by the way, technology can help, right? I think Darien is Latin for land of brand new cars. So in my car, for example, there's a setting that you can put in there that says, when you walk out of the car with your keys, the car will lock. And I use that. So I walk, yep, my car beeped and my car's locked. Right? If you have that technology on your car, take a look. You might be able to change that setting and take advantage of that as well. But again, please, let's try to focus more on that. So one last point I want to bring up in terms of concerns. I'm not a climate change crazy, and I mean that lovingly. But I am someone who's mindful of all that. And I think in the 21st century, anytime you read about not just climate change, but what we know about the dangers of some of these chemicals that are in our society and in our environment, from insecticides and pesticides and fertilizers to this whole PFAS controversy in terms of minute concentrations. I mean, something like a single drop in the equivalent of 5 Olympic-sized swimming pools is too much of that chemical to have in our water. It's that serious. I think as a town, we could do a lot more to be mindful about environmental needs in our town. And as I said, whether it's fertilizer or pesticide use, being thoughtful about not planting invasives, being more careful about nature generally, I think we can, and I think, frankly, we want to do better. I've learned a lot from some new friends that I have in this job, and I'll mention by name Natalie Tallis, Juliette Kane, and Julie Jones are 3 great folks, and they're very knowledgeable about a lot of things that pertain to nature in this town, and I've learned a lot by talking to them. And I think we should do more to try to consolidate and think more carefully about our environmental related committees. Right now they're spread out from the Advisory Committee on Sustainability to the Environmental Protection Commission, which is really about assessing building related environmental issues, and then of course the Coastal Advisory Commission. I think we could do a better job at sharpening that up, and I'll spend 2025 trying to think about how we could do a better job. Mind you, I don't think we need to go down the heavy-handed path of punishment and enforcement. I'm much more of someone who's oriented towards education and encouragement, and we could do more of that, and I look forward to strengthening our approach in 2025. Okay, so some quick project updates. Henley Holmes Royal, if you've been following that, the way these processes work is even though it's a school building, the Board of Selectmen actually oversees the construction of these buildings through the appointment of a building committee, and these are some photographs of that construction that's underway in those 3 places. I had a chance to see some of that on the school tours this past weekend, and they are making phenomenal progress. A few notes here, as you can see, they're about 25% finished with all of that work across all 3 schools. It's pretty impressive. Despite the rain we've had in August, it was pretty dry this fall, and so they're on or ahead of schedule. Scope seems to be manageable. There aren't any undue change orders, and there's been a lot of good transparency with the neighbors addressing their concerns with construction activity near their homes. Once again, I think the key has been people. We've got outstanding folks who are in charge of this. I've watched ONGAP construction. They did all the work on Ox Ridge, and they did one other building I was affiliated with elsewhere. My God, these guys are good. It really is something to watch them work. But we're also well served by the volunteers who are helping us with this, Chris Price and Jill sitting on as chairs of the building committee, and then of course Kevin Munret, who leads facilities for the school systems. These are outstanding individuals, and we can thank them for the progress that they've made to date on that. So I want to talk a little bit about Great Island, and then I'll have some comments to wrap things up. So I don't want to give kind of an update on where that stands, but I want to make a few kind of high-level comments to kind of reframe our process around Great Island. So once we purchased it, I think the key question that we had to answer, which is what process do we need to come up with, right, that's going to give us a strategy that works best for Darien, that works for most people most of the time. And what we've done here is we have adopted a building committee approach. It seemed to work well with Oxridge. It's worked great with Henley Holmes Royal, and I'll do a shout out here to former First Selectman Jamie Stevenson. She was the one who had the idea to put that in place for all of our large projects over $1 million, and real credit goes to her because we've stuck with that strategy, and I think we've been well served by the quality of building projects that we've had as a result of all that. So the structure that we have looks like this. The Board of Selectmen created the Great Island Advisory Committee. It has 5 elected officials on it, 2 members from the Board of Selectmen as well as others. And that group, that includes also 4 experienced citizens, if you will, went through a selection process and selected a consulting firm called Reed Hildebrand. They are landscape architects, and they are world-class in what they do. This is all they do. They have done projects like this all over the United States, hundreds and hundreds of them, to a great level of quality and expertise, and I think we're extremely well served by having them here. But let's be clear about the roles of each of these groups. So if you think about it, from the bottom, Reed Hildebrand is about a process that we need to follow in order to get to this solution. Sometimes it takes time, sometimes it seems a bit slow, but they're taking us through a process that will enable us to get to a good strategy that works for most people most of the time. And their job is to come in and help us gather feedback, get information to support our decision, collect input from our citizens through surveys and workshops, and help synthesize all that and present some ideas and recommendations for the Great Island Committee to consider. But the Board of Selectmen is looking to the Great Island Committee to come up with the formal proposals as to what we're going to do. That's their job, not Reed Hildebrand's job. And then finally, once we get to a recommendation, it'll be the Board of Selectmen's job to vote on that and make a decision as to what we're going to do. Before I get into this timeline, I really want to do a shout out to Monica McNally. She has chaired this committee since I took over as first selectman, and I can tell you she works 40 hours a week on it. She spends an inordinate amount of time with a lot of different constituencies trying to get that right. I would like a round of applause for her efforts. All right, so what's the current status? Here's a little Gantt chart that just shows you this. And it's interesting to recall that we really started this right when Monica took office. We got word that Great Island was going to be for sale. And there was a very long and protracted process that was led by Monica and Board of Finance Chairman Jim Palin to go through and negotiate the purchase of this island. It was an extraordinarily complex effort that required a lot of talent and a lot of time to actually sort through all the issues. But we got to a closing, and it took so long, I actually ended up signing the final documents that enabled us to kind of declare victory on that particular process. In the fall of '23, we formed the Great Island Advisory Committee, and they spent a good part of their time getting organized around this so that our first thing could be done, which was getting access to the island for people, preparing the site, eventually dogs, which we now have, but it's all been part of a thoughtful process that's been able to get us to that point. Reed Hildebrand came on this past summer, and they started to help us form a process around gathering citizen input, keeping it organized, and bringing their best practice to this process. What they're going to deliver at the end of sort of phase 1, phase 2, which is what we're in right now, that's going to be next summer, and they're going to deliver a vision and master plan. And then after that, depending on what we all approve as the vision and master plan, there will be a construction planning and construction administration phase of indeterminate length, okay? So what precisely can we expect when that vision and master plan is ready? So a vision document is going to provide us with some guiding principles about what Great Island is and what we want it to be, and importantly, what it is not. It's going to have a long-term view about how we think about it and what we expect as a community, and it's going to have frameworks for decision-making that we have to undertake in the future. So when big things come up, it'll provide a framework about how we do it, how we gather public input, and how we reach a conclusion on that decision. As for the master plan, That'll have detailed design principles about how we're actually going to build out the island itself and what decisions we'll make. They'll have assessments of the site as well as the buildings themselves, of which there are quite a few. They'll give us some conceptual designs and scenarios for us to pick from, and then, of course, a final selected concept site plan along with a phasing strategy and a cost estimate. Importantly, all of that work on the vision and master plan is going to have input from the public through these workshops, surveys, and frankly, any other way you want to provide feedback, from the leadership on the Great Island Committee, as well as from Reed Hildebrand and their expertise and long experience with this. When we get the master plan, it's going to address some big questions that I know all of you have. What is the right balance between nature and development? How do we actually strike that? What the heck are we going to do with all these buildings? That's a question I have. What are we going to do about parking and vehicle access? How much parking do we want? How much do we want vehicle access? What are we going to do in terms of hospitality businesses or things like restaurants? Are we going to have a snack bar or not? I don't know. And then finally, what about municipal assets like a pool or ice rink? These are all things that people have talked about or mentioned during the surveys and workshops that we've had. The master plan is going to come up with a set of options for that the Great Island Committee will finalize and then recommend to the Board of Selectmen. Again, a transparent process where you can provide feedback at any time. I want to give an update on 23A. So you'll recall that the 23A, it's an access road, and what it is it's this little space right here where the road that goes from basically Rings End Bridge at Pear Tree Point Road, and it's a little road that goes up to the traffic circle that's right there at the entrance of 23A. So the town owns that road and that traffic circle, which is our main access point to get into Great Island. So what's happened with that is that because we've switched from a residential or private use to a municipal use, unless we come up with a strategy where there are precisely zero private vehicles on Great Island, we're going to have to widen that road, and there's not really anything we can do to change that. What's happened is that, unfortunately, unless we just decide we don't want cars at all on Great Island, we're going to have to do that, and it's going to entail cutting down about 15 gorgeous, healthy, mature Norway spruces along this road. It's sad to see that happen, but it's something that we have to have if we're going to widen that road. So paired with that, though, is a robust replanting plan, and so we are taking that seriously, and in fact, anytime we cut down trees of that size in town, we do have a robust plan that's elsewhere in town as well. We're going to make sure that gets replanted in a smart and professional way. You've heard that there have been 2 appeals to this decision filed. So the process is the town decides to take the trees down, they post that decision. If someone doesn't like that, and the public can do that, they can complain to the tree warden and file an appeal. There's a hearing, the tree warden considers that evidence. In this case, the tree warden ruled in favor of the town, and then 2 citizens appealed the tree warden's decision, which you can do by filing an appeal in Stamford Superior Court, and that's what they did. So we're working right now with the town council to deal with that. They are defending the town's position in court. They will put in motions to dismiss both of those cases, but that's going to take time, well into 2025, and it's going to take money to do that. I assure you right now, as God is my witness, if I could see that there was a different way to do this that did not entail taking down those trees, I assure you that we would do it. But I have looked at this 9 Ways to Sunday, and unless we come up with a strategy that says there are no vehicles on Great Island, there is no way to avoid this. So we will get through this process, but I want to make sure everybody kind of had that update. So what can you do for Great Island, right? So the first thing is to participate, right? We really do want your voice. We want to make sure that you have a chance to express yourself in workshops, surveys, talking to the Great Island Committee members or attending their meetings, reaching out to those members or other elected officials, or me. If you want to talk to me about this, I will be happy to speak to you. We also have a new website set up for Great Island that also provides a chance for you to do that. The other point I would make is to have faith in the process. Part of the reason I talked about the professionalism of Reed Hildebrand and the expertise we've assembled on this committee is that these professionals and those committee members are highly motivated to make sure that we get this right, and I have a lot of confidence that they will do that. And then finally, I would ask everybody to be patient and accepting. As I said before, a quality, careful plan is going to take some time to develop. I promise you're going to be happy with it, but keep in mind that even the best plan is not going to please everybody. You cannot make everybody happy with every aspect of this plan. And that's the law of physics. You can't get beyond that. And so I would urge everybody to be accepting of the best plan that we can possibly come up with and get out and enjoy Great Island. So that's all I have to say about that. A few more things and we're done. I want to have a couple points about looking ahead. You have to be of a certain age to recognize this gentleman. I think we all miss that. I don't have an envelope up here, but I'll dispense with that. So a couple of things. A number of people have mentioned sidewalk infrastructure in town and a real interest in pursuing accelerated investments in that. A number of folks would like to have more opportunities for their children to walk to elementary schools or the middle school or high school. I can assure you that all the low-hanging fruit for sidewalks has been picked in this town. It is actually quite difficult to put in new sidewalks, whether there are trees in the way or the road or the area where we need the sidewalk is owned by private landowners or it's a state road. I'm not saying that to say, no, we can't do sidewalks. I'm just saying that we ought to have a pretty good process for figuring out what we're going to do that's more than what we're doing right now. In 2015, there was a pedestrian infrastructure advisory committee. I think that was pretty good. The problem with that was that it was all citizen-led, and it wasn't our building committee structure where you have a committee paired with an expert. And so if we're going to do that, I would like a consultant-led process, somebody who can expertly help us prioritize our sidewalk investments, smartly put them where we'll get the most use out of them, and then help us assess what's going to be required to get there with citizen input to help in prioritization, and we will get that done. Parking, I've come across a company that I think could get us to where we do not have parking tags for any parking in town at train stations or elsewhere. So that's coming, and I hope to get that done this year. Pear Tree Point and Weed Beach, I won't talk more about those other than to say that we are going to put those into the capital plans this year, and I think we should consider them. Pear Tree Point, just to protect that beach, that's important. And frankly, the short lane project at Weed Beach, that just needs to be developed, and we need to finish that. Cherry Lawn traffic study, lots of traffic because of the new playground over there, so a shout out to everybody who made that happen, but every kid that I see on there is having a great time. I haven't talked about flooding or long-range capital because I'm going to do a couple of videos on that in the next 30 to 45 days to explain where those projects stand. And then a few more, which I'll cut off because I've talked too long, but our New Canaan Line Quiet Zone Study, that's something I'm also working on. Town boards and commissions, we get a lot of confusion with all of that I think even some charter changes will be required to straighten that out. And then finally, the Blight Commission has recommended a couple of properties for foreclosure. We've never done that as a town. We've never foreclosed on a property because of blight fines. We are about to do that. It's time to enforce those rules. Those two properties are going to the Board of Selectmen next week, and I'm personally going to vote in favor to foreclose on those properties. And message to the community, I get that some of these are difficult situations, but those are the rules. And if you have a significant accumulation of blight fines, we're coming, and we're going to enforce these rules. Okay, last thing for looking ahead, a shameless promotion. Please sign up for the town's newsletter. We put out I think a very good newsletter led by our communications expert, Marley Hayes. If you haven't done that, please send an email and get signed up for that. Lots of good information. I put out the town newsletter, and then I alternate Fridays. I'll put out my own personal newsletter. Follow us on social media, look us up, and take a look. You'll get a lot of updates as to what's going on. And a few thank yous to wrap this up. I will maintain again, we have the best town hall staff of any town in the state of Connecticut. As you know, Kate Bush left us as our town administrator, and both Susan Barksdale and Jen Charneski stepped up, managed not just their own jobs, but Kate's job as well since her departure. Ed Gentile and the Public Works team with that whole sewer thing, and not just that, but 50 other things that they do, from Great Island to everything else, miracle workers. I don't know how they do it, but we are well served by that team. Jeremy Ginsburg in Planning and Zoning. There is no more calm or gracious person in Town Hall, and the way they deliver their expertise in a fair fashion, I think we are well served by that. Joan Hendrickson, record Treasury earnings. We have never earned as much money as we have for money in the bank as we have in the last couple of years, and it's thanks to Joan's efforts on all that, so I appreciate all that. Our registrars, that whole team that put together this past election, I mean, it wasn't just Kara and Susan, our elected registrars, but it was their deputies, Corey and Tracy, as well as Eric Yostin, and more than 100 volunteers that manned those polling stations over all this extended voting, and it was done without any mistakes. It's really quite amazing. And then frankly, everybody in Town Hall Again, you are all amazing, but I really have to thank all of our volunteers. There are hundreds and hundreds of people that make things work in this town, and it's absolutely amazing. So in closing, people have asked me what I've thought about my first year as being first selectman, and it really has been great. I feel like I'm surrounded by wonderful people, the town hall staff, department heads, it's citizens. It's really just a kind of a enveloping. No, seriously, my answer to that question is that it's a privilege. As long as I hold this job, I will do everything I humanly possibly can to make Darien what I think is the best place in the world to live. That's all I have. Thank you for listening. Costume change.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, John. Great presentation. Next, the Chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission, Steve Albani.
Wow, that's a tough act to follow. Jeez. Mine's going to be boring. I don't have a whole bunch of numbers, but mine will be boring. I also don't have any slides or any of that kind of stuff. But anyway, here we go. Thank you, Seth. Thank you, members of the RTM, for having me, my fellow elected officials, people watching on TV, and of course, my father-in-law, Papa Capelli, who's watching me on TV. This is his favorite thing to do. Good evening. My name is Stephen O'Vaddy. I'm the chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission. I'm excited to deliver my 6th State of the Town address. Papa saw a rerun last week on something that TV 79 did and thought I was missing my big opportunity for a speech. So I don't know what you did, but he said, you better get down there quick. This evening, I will give you all a brief summary of what we've achieved recently in the Planning and Zoning Department and what we're going to see going forward beyond 25 and for 2025 and beyond. Thank yous. As always, I want to start out with a sincere thank you, as John did, to our volunteers who serve on the local boards, the Planning and Zoning Commission, the Zoning Board of Appeals, the Environmental Protection Commission, and the Architecture Review Board. In total, we have 31 volunteers on these 4 boards, plus the Blight Committee or the Blight Commission that kind of sort of reports to us in some way, shape, or fashion. So I'm here representing all 4 boards and commissions. We appreciate all your hard work. Liz Geiger from Architecture Review, Barb Hazelton from the Zoning Board of Appeals, and Eric Yostin are the chairs of the other boards, and my vice chair is Adam Balgash, who is the vice chair of the P&Z committee. They all do a great job. These boards are always looking for volunteers to step up and do additional stuff. So if you want to be on one of the boards or commissions, please reach out to me or Jeremy Ginsburg, who is the director of planning use in the town, if you're interested. The theme of this year's speech is steady as she goes. Okay, we've had a lot of projects, commercial projects in the past couple of years, and the single-family market is always constantly renovating itself. As John alluded to, a lot of people love to live in Darien. They invest back in their homes. We're also having a lot of commercial development here, which is hard to manage at some point in time. But we're not trying to reinvent the watch here in Darien. What we're trying to do is keep up with times and focus on suburban renewal. Projects underway right now. I've given this speech, like I said, 6 times. These projects have been around for a really long time, so we'll give you another overview on all of them. Maybe someday, if I'm still up here, we won't have to talk about it anymore because they're all being finished. But I've mentioned over the past few years that change is on the horizon. I'm glad to say that we can all now see it firsthand in Norotan Heights and in downtown that I've been referencing in my remarks all the past few years. There are also some smaller and new projects in town. There's a little one that's down at Tokenique. There's the Norotan Firehouse, the fire department's workforce house that was built over in Norotan. And on the east end of the town, we're going to be getting a new car wash pretty soon. The first big one that we like to talk about is the redevelopment of Norotan Heights east of Edgerton by Federal Realty. That project is called Darien Commons. All the 122 apartments, residential apartments, are filled. The retail commercial space is nearly all leased out. There are a couple of new stores that are coming in and some that are there for the holiday season. This new development reinvigorated Norotan Heights, and it was actually visited by Governor Lamont last year. He came down, he wanted to go see the project, so he came firsthand with his entourage and visited the property. It was just absolutely floored. No doubt there's a big improvement over what used to previously be on the site in many, many respects. I don't know if anyone remembers the old Stop and Shop and Walgreens that were there. That has been replaced by Gregory's Coffee, Lululemon, and Balto, and a new Walgreens. I think that's a little bit different from what was there then was what is there now. The redevelopment of the old Norotan Heights Shopping Center and the property to the west of Farmers Market is called Heights Crossing. That is the one that John Zagrotsky spoke about that's being developed by the Vaccaro family. It is expected to be completed in the spring or next summer in 2025. I've spoken with the developers many times, and they're working hard to bring a good variety of commercial tenants to the first floor of these apartment buildings. They've received a lot of interest in the residential apartments on the upper floors, and some people have actually done pre-applications for those apartments on the upper floors. The retail component's going to be anchored by a Goddard preschool, which is a franchise operation. There's another one very similar to that one that's in Westport. And they're also going to have a new Darien Donut shop on a corner. It's not going to be called Darien Donuts, but we're getting a new donut shop back there by the train station. It also, we told them what we wanted, and they delivered. There's also going to be some space for 2 more sit-down restaurants. There's a fountain in the middle, similar to what's over at Grove Street, and there's going to be restaurants in that location. Right now, the scaffolding along Hollow Tree Road and Heights Road is planned to come down very soon. The concrete sidewalks that John was alluding to, we want to get that done before the harsh winter weather starts and the snow season comes. With that said, the goal eventually is to connect the sidewalks from Hollow Tree Ridge Road all the way to Chase Bank and Norotan Avenue. There's a couple other properties in there, but what we do as a Planning and Zoning Commission, we require you to replace the sidewalks if you can do anything substantial there, and that's going to happen there. There's some other things there that have to happen. That is a walking commuter path, and it has to be cleared, and I would like to see it cleared very soon. My daughter, Caitlin, is a new train commuter, and so I need it cleared for her. What we need now is just the building inspector to sign off, and then scaffolding come down, and the netting will come down. The Vaccars are actually going to donate that netting to the Darien Little League to protect the fire department on the other end from home runs and foul balls, because I guess they land up in their parking lot. It was pretty nice of them. The next is the Corbin District project downtown on Boston Road adjacent to Interstate 95. Baywater Properties, which is basically David Genovese and his whole team, have completed the 3 mixed-use replacement buildings on the east side of Corbin Drive, which is effectively called Phase 1. It's not really Phase 1, it's really Phase 2, but I'm going to keep it simple. That project has 38 apartments that are all filled, which are all filled, and all the local stores that were on the other side of Corbin Drive on the Post Road basically transferred to the new buildings. So we actually really didn't lose any tenant that had a business in town. They're all there. Phase 2, which is west of Corbin Drive, is well underway, and now you can start to see the concrete elevator shafts coming out of the ground. They're actually coming out of the below-grade parking garage, and that'll keep going up and up, and then in the back is where an office building is. The next thing you're gonna see is the interior of a erector set parking garage, which is gonna be above grade. That garage, when you do see it, will be wrapped with new buildings, and so you will never see the garage from the street. But phase two won't be done for about another year or two. What those projects have in common is that large projects oftentimes take time to come to fruition for one reason or another. For example, the Weed Beach Meadow project that John spoke about was approved by the EPC in 2020. Now we're in 2025. It was also approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission in 2024, and hopefully, as John stated, we'll start to see that sometime happen in 2025 or 2026. The project does provide a rare opportunity to expand our existing beaches and create more usable town space for our residents. The beach is going to get expanded, and a lot of stuff is going to come out, and it actually does look really nice. As you all know, the town purchased Great Island a year ago, and the access road to the project was approved by the local land use boards in 2024. As John alluded to, the widening project has been put on hold to road contractor scheduling issues, and also the pending legal appeal, which John alluded to, was about the trees. One other significant project that received approvals nearly 2 years ago is well underway, and John just spoke about too, is the plan to reconstruct additions and alterations to three of the town's 5 elementary schools. This project, as John said, and he and I did not compare notes, so if I'm repeating, sorry, he went first and he's more important. Is better known as HHR, which is the Hanley Homes and Royal School project. I'm pleased to say that the work will be in great enhancement to our community and the educational community of the town of Darien. Most important, mostly the completed initial improvements are the expansions to the bus loops and the access to those schools, and especially the curb cut out of Henley onto the Post Road, and all these things that they did will continue to help the parking traffic flow. We're integral project of the schools. We want kids to be able to walk to school on sidewalks and be safe at all times. Another final municipal project on the horizon is the parking lot improvement and sustainability project for Pear Tree Point Park. The Parks Department and Commission have been working on that hard for years to get that project started. We are going to see it at the beginning of 2025. As you can see, the Planning and Zoning Commission has a focus on both transformative commercial projects and very important municipal and school projects, along with all the residential homes we do look at. I would be remiss a little bit if I didn't discuss the Avalon property on Hollow Tree Ridge Road. That was recently sold for $120 million. It's one of the largest sales in the state of Connecticut of any transaction that's happened. That property contains 189 apartment units, of which 47 of them, or 30%, were deed restricted affordable units. The deed restriction does come off in 2030, so that's about another 5 or 6 years. So those affordable apartments will become market rate unit apartments. There's not a law that says we have to replace those, but that's something that John did allude to with all of our new projects, basically have at least 14% affordable units. Needless to say, this amount of investment in the town of Darien is very impressive, and it's a very good sign that we have a great community that global companies and statewide companies would like to invest in our town. Remember, all these larger commercial projects help to shift the real estate tax burden from single-family residential homeowners to commercial property owners. Jim might get into that a little bit, but our residential base is always expanding, but there is a shift there that you may see that in your tax bills. One of the other things I wanted to mention is a focus of this year in my little talk here is the office sector in the Darien commercial real estate market. It's a long-time Corbin building that was on the corner of Boston Post Road, and Corbin Drive was demolished along with the former high-rise Bank of America building as part of the Corbin District project. The next office building scheduled to be removed in town is a building called 3 Parklands, which will be replaced by a new apartment building in its same place. This trend started as more people worked from home, and when the sectors of the office market softened, in some respects, and the residential side of the commercial real estate market was very active. As many of you know, there's a pending proposal to replace 5 of the existing office buildings at Thorndale Circle Office Park and to construct 5 apartment buildings in their place with a total of 175 dwelling units. That application is currently being reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission in a special meeting, which is actually going on right now. And we're not really even supposed to have meetings in December. But that decision on that application is expected early in 2025. It's too early to know what the commission's decision will be, as the hearing process is still ongoing. With that said, the high end of the boutique regional office market is actually booming. That means Darien, New Canaan, Greenwich, and some aspects of Wilton. I'm pleased to note that we have some significant new office tenants who have decided to locate into the town of Darien. The first relocation is of the renowned consulting firm McKinsey & Company from Stanford, and they're the first one to come in town. They're actually going to an existing Corbin building, that's why earlier I called it really Phase 2, which is at 34 Old Kings Highway South. It's a tribute to Darien that we're able to attract such an organization to our community. Next is the professional services firm Aon that's going to move to Darien. They're consolidating its office space in South Winter Connect to the new office building that's going to be in the Corbin District. The second phase of the Corbin District project will bring with it brand new office space, new buildings that are going to be constructed. That building is actually in the back, up against I-95. It's going to be a little bit taller, but it's going to hide the highway and stop some of that noise John was talking about. So Darien, its office uses increase over time, and much of the space in that new building is also pre-leased by developers. It's clearly a sign that we're doing something right here in Darien to attract such businesses as that, and they have choices to where they want to locate, and they did choose downtown Darien to where they want to locate. I'm glad to realize that they have decided and realized that this is a great place to live, work, and shop. We actually love successful office tenant users. They come here, they provide tax dollars, they buy lunch, sometimes they get breakfast, and hopefully they stay for dinner before going home. And there's no parking problems on weekends, because most of those guys don't work on weekends. So that's something that we do encourage. What the commission will be working on in 2025 is the next item. John alluded to it a little bit. One of the items that we hope to tackle in 2025 is our stormwater management regulations that alludes to flooding. It's been a few years since our stormwater management regulations have been in place, and we're working with an outside engineering firm to review them and make sure what we have in place is appropriate and identify where we can make them better in order to address stormwater management issues going forward. Every single one of our major projects has a significant stormwater management piece of the application. That's something that we're really working on. We talked about it years ago. Underneath the Darien Commons project are 2 Olympic-sized swimming pools that hold the water. That's why Heights Road doesn't flood anymore. And that cost the town $0. They paid for the whole thing. It's imperative that when Darien gets developed, drainage and stormwater management becomes one of the focuses of our commission. We realize that, we understand it, and that's always going to be something that we keep on the top of our list. The legislative session up in Hartford starts in January, runs through June. We expect that in the past years, housing-related bills and other zoning bills which could affect Darien will be put forth and discussed. We will continue to work with Darien's legislators to understand these bills, their potential impacts, and if necessary, send in or give testimony to the state legislator on how we think about these bills. There are many changes that come from Hartford that we need to monitor, understand, and respond to. We can advocate for more Class A office space in the TOD districts versus apartments if that's what the Planning Commission so chooses. The town of Darien zoning department is also investigating the possibility of implementing zoning citations, which will give enforcement to our staff and ability to find violators. That's something that we've never done before, and it's never been in the state statute to do it, as town council told us a while ago. While much more due diligence needs to be done to better understand what the state statutes allow us to do, if we decide to proceed, we may need to come to the RTM for an authorization and may need to change a form of the code of ordinances. More detail will follow in the coming months. That follows the lead that the Blight Committee did and that Frank worked on years ago and that you all authorized. Most importantly, in 2025 brings within the start of the 2026 Town Plan and Conservation Development. This again is required by the state statute. The commission is required to update our plan every 10 years. And while our 2016 plan has well served us, it's time to reevaluate where we are and where we hope to be as the future when we can serve and to redevelop the town. It's imperative that residents, building owners get involved, and people tell us what your thoughts are. As I said earlier, we're not trying to reinvent the watch in our town, but we want to make sure we move it forward properly. We will be soliciting public input sometime after the first of the year in an effort to hear more from you all and your constituents. We hired an outside consultant that does that, and it's a different firm than we had last time, but they'll do an excellent job. The Plan of Conservation Development is one of the documents that will guide us and the town boards and the land use boards going forward. So, as you can see, there's been a lot of construction activity, and the Planning and Zoning Commission has been very active in 2024. Much of our work for 2025 is already on our plate already, but my outset of this is steady as she goes. Okay, over the next year, the town will start to see many visible projects take shape and more on the horizon, steady as she goes. Overall, to summarize these remarks, I'm pleased to say that the town of Darien Planning and Zoning Commission and the town of Darien real estate market is doing great. As always, during this time, shopping time of year, and shopping and entertaining and dinner time, shop local, support all these new businesses, the existing and new retailers and the existing restaurants in town. So in conclusion, I want to wish you all the best in 2025 and a happy holiday season. I could talk for hours and speak about other stuff that you guys want to talk about, but I think we're good. Thank you for your time. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Stephen. Great report. I listened to these and I hearken back to the first study we did on drainage in Darien in 2009 when I was on the Board of Selectmen. Not an easy problem to solve, but the steps taken with the new development down in the Roden Heights do make a difference, so we're on the way anyway. Now, on behalf of the Board of Education, the Chair, Jill McKenna.
Break it. Sorry, Mike. All right.
Good evening, everyone. Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM, fellow elected officials, and members of the community. I'd like to thank you all for hosting us this evening, and I'd like to thank TV 7. I'll begin by thanking my fellow board members, David Brown, Greg Ramley, Katie Loveland. Is it too loud? Okay. It's not going to sync. You can hear me? Okay, thank you, Seth. Then I'll begin by thanking you all and my fellow board members, David Brown, Greg Grambling, Katie Loveland, Dennis Maroney, Robin Nelson, Sarah Parent, John Seeley, and most recently, Joanna Walsh, who just joined us in November. Welcome, Joanna, and thank you for agreeing to serve. I'd also like to thank Julie Best for her 3 years of service to the board. A longtime volunteer for our schools. On our board, Julie served as chair of the Communications and Policy Committees, was a consistent supporter of arts education, and spoke up often about providing a range of academic opportunities for our students. Thank you for your time and your commitment, Julie. Behind me as I'm speaking, you'll see images of Darien Public School students at many different ages and stages. My thanks to Jeff DeMeo for his work in putting it together. I'm not narrating through the video, as you can already tell, but you'll see students in classrooms, common spaces, on stage, and at play. For fun or for sport, in our buildings and in our fields, all around town. As you see the images, please note the upgraded auditorium you all supported last year. See the new video wall at the back, which was generously donated by the Darien Foundation. You'll see the wall used for set design and to enhance a concert performance. It can also be used by our students as part of their classwork. This is the kind of community investment that enables us to meet our strategic STEAM and STEM goals in support of all of our students. This year, the Darien school system has 4,572 students enrolled K through 12, with another 108 students in our early learning program. Our most recent enrollment study by the MP Planning Group, projected out to 2034, noted a slow increase of approximately 72 students, or 2% in 5 years, and 120 students over the next 10. For those who may be concerned about existing or new capacity in our schools, we create sections, elementary school sections, i.e. assigning students to teachers and classrooms using medium growth enrollment projections. But per the state process, when we do building committees, we use high growth projections. Our enrollment is not expected to exceed the capacity being built for Haley Homes or Wall. Ox Ridge had a recent influx of K through 5 students over the past couple of years and does run very close to capacity. The Board of Education is keeping a very close eye on this. Middlesex Middle School, Darien High School, and Tokenique are scheduled for a study in the next fiscal year. We continue to work closely with planning and zoning on how changes to the housing mix might impact our enrollment assumptions. Thank you to Jeremy and Steve and their teams for their close work with us. ELP's August enrollment is up from 78 students last year at this time to 85 students. Some of the increase is attributable to last year's legislative change to the kindergarten start date from January 1st to September 1st. Of note, last year we expanded the program from 4 days to 5 days for several reasons, including the ability to provide more social time and play-based opportunities for our students. As our enrollment demonstrates, our district remains a highly desirable school system known for its academic excellence. This year, the Board of Education has 5 primary goals. The first is to ensure the safety and wellness of all students and staff. The second, to align and support district priorities to the budget. The third is to support the year 4 implementation of the strategic plan and the vision of the graduate. The fourth is to enhance engagement and communication between the community, the board, and the district. And the fifth is to participate in the elementary building projects. Our goal 1, safety, security, and wellness of students and staff, remains a top district priority. Over the past 5 years, the board has assessed and enhanced each school's security needs. Last year, you approved appropriations for 2 school security infrastructure improvements. Work on both began this summer and is largely completed, with one last component planned for December break. Our security department continues to work in close collaboration with the Darien Police Department, and we appreciate their continued provision of SROs for our middle and high schools. Our SSOs, or school security officers, continue to successfully support our elementary schools. Critical focus on the mental health of our students, their immediate and longer-term mental health needs, continues through the work of our Director of Mental Health and others. We are collaborating with the town's Mental Health Task Force, Behavioral Health Subcommittee, and local organizations such as Kids in Crisis, in particular through their Teen Talk program at the middle and high schools. We thank the Community Fund and the town of Darien for their support of the Teen Talk program at the middle school this year. New efforts that directly or tangentially impact mental health include the adoption of new personal device practices implemented already K through 8 and DHS to be finalized, and our restorative practices training, which was mandated by the state. Our second goal has to do with the continued improvement of our budgeting practices. As you're all aware, the Board of Education has a significant role in shaping the school district's financial strategy, and at 2/3 of the overall town budget, has a large impact on the rest of the town's portfolio. While educational priorities are paramount, our board must also recognize other factors, such as long-term sustainability, infrastructure needs, and potential economic challenges. It was much nicer with the music. We'll have to continue that next year. The Board of Education is the entity with the authority to make decisions about how funds are allocated in our own budget. Neither the Board of Finance nor the RTM has line item veto power. This responsibility requires us, the Board of Education, to be thoughtful, strategic, and fiscally responsible. We're proud of the work done last year to take our special education transportation model in-house when busing and costs increased at the rate that they did. With this $755,000 appropriation you all granted last May, we were able to purchase the Sprinter vans, Type 2 buses, and wheelchair vans we needed in time to have them up and running for the start of the school year in August. As a reminder, this initiative is projected to save over $1 million over the next 3 years. This savings is greater than anticipated, as the number of drivers electing insurance was half of the forecast used for the budget season. As I said, we're really proud of this, but it took all of us working together to get it done. We worked closely with the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, members of the RTM, and Planning and Zoning, because we needed to find a place to park the bus. So thank you to everybody for working with us to get that done. We're also proud of the work done to adjust a lower overall budget increase than what we actually requested last year. Our staff worked through insourcing and outsourcing models, looked carefully at comparable non-classroom staffing ratios at other districts in our area, and implemented most of the shift from 4 to 5 classes at the secondary level. While there was some negative press around the contractual implementation at the middle school, the reality is we were able to implement the change. Staff have reviewed the process for next year to address any areas of concern. This year, following the Board of Finance's explanation of their tax strategy, we have provided quantitative and qualitative guidance to our administration. I will emphasize, the Board of Education remains committed to providing the best possible education for our students and shares the community's desire to prioritize student needs and programming. To ensure the long-term health of our district, we will carefully review all options and make informed choices. Our work to provide a starting point that is relatively consistent with the Board of Finance tax strategy is still the beginning. Developing and adjusting a budget will be an ongoing process with careful planning, flexibility, and a commitment to balancing priorities. Those of you interested in the specifics may wish to reference our November 26th meeting. Our third goal refers to the administration's work as outlined in the strategic plan, including the vision of a graduate. Now in its 4th year, the strategic plan continues to guide the work of the district in the areas of teaching and learning, wellness, diversity and inclusion, the use of technology to support teaching and learning, expanding the professional capacity of staff, and the focus for this year, the implementation of Vision of a Graduate for all grades. Some of the indicators we use to talk about our success in this area. Student performance across standardized testing continues to be exceptional, as reflected on SAT, AP tests, and the annual number of National Merit Scholars, 4, Commended Scholars, 24, and Presidential Scholar candidates, 3. 95.2% of our graduates attend 2 to 4 year colleges. And one of the things we're doing at the board table is continuing to talk about all of the graduates, including those who don't plan to go to 2 to 4 year colleges. Everybody matters. Everybody has a place. 507 of our students took 1,241 AP tests. Since 2020, the number of students taking APs has increased by 9%. The number of exams administered has increased by 28%. During that time, their scores have improved slightly, from 91% receiving a score of 3 or higher to 93% receiving a score of 3 or higher. We have been working to increase access to AP exams and are extremely excited to report that we have. And we've done it successfully. In the past 5 years, we've doubled the number of students and languages receiving the seal of biliteracy. Our high levels of SBAC, NGSS, or Next Generation Science Standards, and SAT performances are reflected in our State Accountability Index of 85.6. Our recognition of our district as the best communities for music education by the NAM Foundation, the production quality of musical and arts performances you saw, and that includes chorus, band, orchestra, and theater, and the continued success of our athletes and sports teams and clubs, FCAC and SEAC with 9 divisional championships, 8 FCAC championships, 6 state championships, and unified sports running 3 seasons a year. Our last 2 goals are around communications and the building projects. I will highlight the successful work of the new communications committee, including the creation of a district communication plan, which looks at multiple new and existing channels for engaging with the community, communication-focused policy work, and the creation of a district dashboard reflecting student and district performance. First Selectman Zagrodzky and Steve Alvaney also outlined the work of HHR. So I'll just say a quick thank you to my fellow members of that committee, including my co-chair Chris Price, for their work and leadership. I'd also like to thank the administrative and facilities staff for their support of the project. We had a successful and smooth opening to those 3 schools in August, which is not a given. Thank you to our teachers, students, parents, and neighbors for their cooperation and understanding. Thank you to each of you for your support of our schools. Lastly, my personal thanks to the late David Martin for his considerable commitment to the success of this project. Going forward, some of our future challenges and/or opportunities that are outside of our control include nationwide teacher shortages, technological changes, and higher costs in education. We'll be working to stay ahead of teacher shortages by focusing on recruitment and retention of staff and teacher leadership opportunities to support career paths, as well as by preparing for negotiation of our next teacher contract this coming summer. We'll continue to be actively engaged around the use of AI and its impact on teaching and learning, as well as student use of personal devices during the school day. We'll be focused on more strategic budgeting locally, but we'll also continue our advocacy at the state level. Tracy Mara, our Assistant Director of Curriculum, Amy Fedigan, and I attended a legislative breakfast last Friday. Many districts spoke about the impact of increased costs in several areas, including special education and its variable funding structure, unfunded state mandates such as K-3 reading legislation, and play-based learning. We feel strongly about the importance of meeting the needs of all of our students and agree with shifts like the focus on play-based learning. However, we will continue to work to ensure our legislators understand the impact of legislative requirements and corresponding funding or gaps in funding. This year, we hosted the pre-K through 12 tri-state group who reviewed our fine and performing arts programs, and NEOSC for their decennial accreditation visit. Both organizations spoke to the excellence of our programming and the talents and efforts of our staff. We have much to be proud of. This year begins my 9th year as a member of the Darien Board of Education. Quite a bit has changed during that time. We've rebuilt our special education department, expanded our high school cafeteria, rebuilt Ox Ridge, and began renovating Hinley Homes and Royal. Added security personnel, starting first with SROs, and years later, adding SSOs to the elementary schools. Implemented a one-to-one initiative at the high school, expanded it all the way through the elementary schools during COVID, and then moved the high school back to bring your own device after assessing how students were actually using or not using school-issued devices. We've adapted time and time again and will continue to do so. This coming year will be no different. In closing, I'd like to thank our administration, led by Superintendent Alan Adley, Amy Fedigan, Shirley Klein, Marge Sion, Rich Rudel, and our teachers and staff. I'd also like to thank our constituents for the opportunity to serve, and my board for the privilege and responsibility of serving as the chair of the Board of Education. Thank you to each of you for your time and attention tonight. On behalf of the board, I wish everyone a healthy, safe, and happy holiday season, and look forward to working collaboratively with all of you over productive discussions in the new year. Thank you for your time.
The results of 24-42 Gorham's Pond increase, 63 in favor, no noes, 3 abstentions. Resolution passes. Next, the chair of the Board of Finance for the most exciting and invigorating presentation, Jim Palin, chair.
I guess you listen to John tell you to lock your doors, come visit Great Island, look at the new schools. You listen to Steve talk about all the new developments in town, the new restaurants, the nail salons, and everything else great that's going on. You listen to Jill talk about sports championships, a new auditorium, how great our schools are. And I guess my job is to now talk to you about how do we actually pay for it all. So hopefully we still have a quorum here, and I'll try to not be too long. Just change the slides here. Yep. Okay. Okay. Thanks, Mike. Okay, I just want to start off by introducing members of my board here. You know, this is my, starting my 10th year on the Board of Finance, and before that I spent the better part of 8.5 years on the RTM in the seats that you all are sitting in today. My vice chair is Dan Baumgardner. Dan's coming on his 5th year as my vice chair and one of my strongest partners on the board. Taylor Carter and Rob Cardone, both of which have been on the board for 7 years now. Paul Hendrickson, who has 15 years tenure on a board. And then we have 2 new members of the Board of Finance that recently joined this year, Malin Gasserud and Jenny Schwartz, both of which came from this body. And so I'd like to welcome them both to this board. I'd also like to take a minute and just recognize, John Walcott, who served on the board for about 3.5 years and stepped down this year. And also David Martin, who passed away at the end of July of this summer. David was a member of the board for over 4 years. He was extremely hardworking. He was extremely bright, served on a number of very important committees, considered him a friend, and I think we all counted on him a lot. So just want to say we all miss him. And last and not least, Jennifer Charneski, who is our finance director, and is currently, as John pointed out, acting as our co-town administrator. So she's got a full plate. So this is a slide I used a couple years ago, and I'd like to talk a little bit about at least how we view the town and our approach to financing the town and financing all the services that need to be delivered. As John pointed out, there's a lot of things that make Darien There's a lot of things that make Darien great, and I think there's a lot of things that draw people to, to move here. One, as Jill touched on a lot during her presentation, which had lots of music and videos and so forth, so I'm not going to entertain you with any of that, but is our schools. Our schools, high school, middle school, and elementary schools are generally ranked at the top, if not among the top, of all the schools in Connecticut and certainly in the surrounding areas. Our teachers and our staff that we have there are among the best in the state, and I think one of the core reasons why people do move to Darien is for the kids to attend these schools. But they also, as John pointed out, move here because it's a very good investment. Home values in Darien have showed fairly consistent appreciation over the past 22 years that I've been in town here. And as John mentioned, currently there's a very low volume of real estate on the market, which has generally continued to propel and home values upward. During the recent reappraisal that took place last year ahead of our sending out our property tax bills, the average homes in Darien over the past 5 years went up by 25%, and that was fairly consistent throughout all 5 quintiles when we look at the grand list. Our parks and beaches, right? Another reason that people move here, and I think something that folks value significantly in our community, particularly with post-COVID and additional work and the additional number of days that people work from home. I think the ability to access our parks and beaches and other outdoor spaces is becoming increasingly important and increasingly helps us to compete against and look attractive relative to our neighboring towns. Our public services, I touched on the education services, but if you look at our public works, our parks and rec program, if you look at our fire, police, EMS, and other emergency medical services, they're all ranked among the top in the state. When you look at our other social and health programs here, all of our services, our roads, our infrastructure, our sewer, absent the small mishap that we had last weekend, are all in great shape. So the town as a portfolio, I think, is very attractive. Geographically, we're close to New York City, which is one of the largest financial capitals in the world, access to great jobs and a sort of very vibrant market, and we're about a 55-minute train ride to Grand Central. Lastly, taxes, which we'll talk about. That's how we pay for all of this. Taxes, if you look at Lower Fairfield, we continue to remain one of the most attractively taxed towns in the state of Connecticut. Other than Greenwich, our mill rate, which incorporates the value of our homes, is among the lowest in the state. All of these together, we think, make Darien a very attractive place to live. Talking about mill rates, the very bottom line, I stacked up here, starting from the bottom to top. Greenwich has the lowest mill rate, followed by Darien, New Canaan, Westport, Rowayton, Fairfield, Ridgefield, and Wilton. And as you look across this graph, you'll see a couple blips on all of the different mill rate lines. Those generally demark a revaluation. So you can see on the far right of the graph, Darien dips down from fiscal year 2024 to the current fiscal year 2025 that we're in. That was a result of our grand list basically appreciating by 25%, and therefore we saw our mill rate come down materially, even though the dollar amount of taxes that you all pay went up by about 4.5%. So locally, I think we continue to remain very attractive. What did 2024 look like, the fiscal year that we just ended on June 30th? On the revenue side, property taxes again came in higher than expected for 2 reasons. One, we have small additions in the grand list throughout the year: kitchens, bathrooms, pools, the acquisition of new automobiles. And also we assume that we only collect around 99.5% of the taxes on each of January and July, so we bake in a little bit of a cushion. When in reality, our tax collector brings in close to 100% of our taxes. Secondly, if you look at other revenues, we were $4.2 million ahead of schedule. The majority of that, $3.2 million, was related to investment income that was $3.2 million higher than what we had projected. Interest rates remained high. Our treasurer took on a number of new investments, including treasuries. The Fed cut rates much slower than most people expected, and this delivered an extra $3.2 million of income, along with tipping fees and some other town service revenues. From the state grant perspective, we came in about $400,000 above budget. We do not get a lot of state aid, and while it is very volatile on a percentage basis, it has a very small effect on our overall budget and your overall taxes. We've learned to live off of just area and property taxes, for the most part. And then lastly, the contribution from fund balance. Incorporating some capital projects that we moved sort of outside the normal budget process that included some security measures at the schools, the new buses that the Board of Ed spoke about and so forth. We ended up not using the $3.8 million that we had identified to use from fund balance. So that'll be recycled back in and be available to help support the budget this year. On the expenditure side, the town came in around $1.1 million under budget, primarily due to vacancies and so forth that existed throughout the different departments. The Board of Ed, after providing them a supplemental appropriation of $180,000, basically came in right on budget. So effectively, they were $180,000 above budget versus what you all approved last May. Debt service was spot on. And from the capital perspective, nothing really changed. We moved forward with all the capital that we had. When you look at overall expenditures, this is everything that we're spending. This is not net of revenues that we collect, whether they be state grants, whether they be town clerk revenues, investment income. This is everything that we spend. And you can see that this has continued to trend up, and that the 1-year compounded annual growth rate is significantly greater than the 3-year and the 10-year. If you ask why are expenditures going up by 7%, but our taxes went up by materially less last year? Well, one, it was an expansion of the grant list due to some of the projects you heard Mr. Mulvaney talk about, and also in part because we added over $3 million from fund balance to help alleviate some of that increase. But that fund balance is a finite resource, and we can't continue to count on it. The schools occupy about 75% of our overall expenditures. When you look at enrollment, you can see back in 2014-15, enrollment peaked at just under 5,000 students. And while this graph isn't exactly to scale, it's meant to kind of show you the absolute amount of changes here. We've seen enrollment drop through 2021, tick back up a little bit, tick back down, and remain relatively steady over the last couple years. At the same time, if we look at the overall expenditures per student, as the enrollments come down by 3 or 4%, the expenditures per student have continued to rise. Over the last 5 years, 4.2% on average, while the student population has come down. Debt. We've had a lot of big capital projects. We just officially closed out the Oxford Elementary School, which is certainly one of the nicest elementary schools in the state. It came in under budget, and I think in everyone's view that was a great success. That project was close to $60 million. The acquisition of Great Island was $85 million, and we bonded another $5 million approximately to deal with some of the expanded access and to pay for the consultants and so forth that we brought on board to help us with the vision of the island as well as the master plan. So our debt, you can see the debt that's outstanding has spiked from 84 million to 184 million. And we expect this spring we'll issue between 45 and 50 million more, depending on the cadence of the HHR construction, to fund the second phase of that project. So our debt is expected by the end of next year to be in the $225 to $235 million range. But the actual amount of debt outstanding is not necessarily our first focus. It's what the actual debt service is. Over the past 6 or 7 years, we've worked in connection with refinancing existing bonds and issuing new debt to level out our debt service, to change our debt structure from one which was a 20-year level principal payment to what is a 20-year, and in the case of Great Island, 30-year level debt service, much like your mortgages. And in some cases, we've deferred principal for a couple years in order to stack the new debt service on top of the old, much like the game of Tetris. And it's worked. It's allowed us to spend $103 million for HHR, close to $60 million for Oxbridge, 90+ million for Great Island and some of the build out, and not materially change debt service, either absolutely or as a percentage of our overall budget, which is what we keep an eye on. Interest rates. Interest rates, in terms of where we can borrow money, there's been a lot of volatility on the right third of that graph, but are basically back to where they were last year when we spoke. So in terms of long-term rates, 10, 20, and 30-year municipal bonds in the AAA category, which is what Darien is rated, our borrowing cost hasn't really changed over the last year. But what this graph does not talk about is short-term rates. And I mentioned our treasurer was very successful. We came in over $3 million above budget in our investment earnings. But interest rates are definitely coming down. There's an expectation that next month you'll see another cut, and then the Fed will pick up a policy of sort of every other meeting cutting. So we're not going to continue to be able to rely on those investment earnings off of our fund balance and of our bonded proceeds that we're using to build out HHR and some of the other projects. We're not going to be able to continue to rely on that. So as we begin to think about what taxes are going to look like in our model, if you listen to our meeting from a month ago, we've started to factor in cutting our investment earnings by 25% in an absolute dollar sense. So good news, borrowing rates are steady. Bad news, investment rates are coming down. This page, the Board of Finance at our last meeting discussed overall guidance. And we've changed the format by which we're communicating this guidance. Last year, in the last few years, and following in John's footsteps, we talked a lot about sort of core and growth. We've switched this to talk a little bit more about what are the core services that we need to offer, on the town side and the school side, and what are the priorities? What are the high priority services? What are the medium priority? And what are the lower priority services? So as the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education move forward in developing their budgets, these are things that we'd like them to take into account. The Board of Finance's, our responsibility is to determine the overall appropriations for both the schools and the town. Pull that together in a spreadsheet, our funds on hand, bonding, other types of things such as ground list growth, and put forward an overall package to be brought forward to the RTM for you all to consider and ultimately vote on. But it's very clear that the spending decision, the taxing decisions we make, and the appropriation decisions that we make, not only do they affect your taxes and what you pay every January 1 and July 1, but they affect the amount of money that's available to the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Ed to run their operations. So these are inevitably tied. Members of the Board of Finance need to consider the effects of our decisions on running the town services, and members of the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen need to think about the spending decisions and the prioritization that they make, decisions that they make, and how that ultimately affect the taxpayer. We're effectively one big team. So what we've asked other boards, as we've seen some of our core expenses, whether they be contractual pay increases for our staff partners, whether they be the cost of health care for our staff or other capital projects and so forth, we've asked them to look at and prioritize all the different things that they're delivering and make sure that the resources are focused on things that are core and things that are very high priority. On the third line here, in terms of efficiency and technology, And I think Jill mentioned a few that they discovered during their last budget season as it relates to staffing, as it relates to insourcing and outsourcing, the use of technology. All of our boards, including our department heads, need to be thinking about how they can do things, deliver the same services more efficiently or cheaper, or how they can, for the same amount of money, enhance the services that we're delivering, if that's what our residents want. And I think transparency and communication. I think, our board believes that as we're developing these budgets, we're trying to paint the financial picture for the town for the next 12 months. And so we would like all capital projects to be brought forward at the same time that the Board of Ed and Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, and ultimately you all are making the taxation decisions for town. We think the off-cycle appropriations, while there are many times when they're needed, when something breaks, during COVID we had to make special appropriations, the money is there to make those appropriations. But from an overall spending and planning perspective, we would like all those to come forward at the budget time so we can all make one large informed decision. I talked a little bit before about the circularity of budgeting, spending, appropriation, and taxing. The operating decisions, the services that the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Ed choose to deliver, whether it's buying an island, building new schools on the capital side, whether it's new programs, new staffing models, new languages, new maintenance delivery programs on the town side, or parks and rec initiatives and so forth. It all ultimately comes back and we need to pay for it, and it affects our taxation. And so those things need to all be considered when the boards are developing their budgets. And likewise, as I said, when the Board of Finance is considering the appropriations, we need to think about how and where is that going to affect the operations of the two individual boards. This is one way where we've asked the boards to think about their budgeting. On the left side, there's a graphic here. It's the same one you all may have seen at one of our meetings a few weeks ago. But when I think about our budgets, they have core aspects of the budget, things that are basic services, that are state or federally mandated. They deal with the safety and well-being of our residents and our staff. We need them to maintain our infrastructure and so forth. These are core services. Outside those core services are other services that are not core. Does not mean they're not important to the residents of this town or to the public and to our boards. But there's lower priority non-core services and there's higher priority non-core services. Doesn't mean that any of those services are bad or not valued by our constituents, but we need to kind of think about how we're prioritizing these. Because as you see, if we move to the right-hand side of the page, when our core services, the cost of our core services expand, like we've seen over the past few years, and even the cost of our core or non-core but high priority services expand, that increases the size of that circle. And if we all here believe that the size of the overall circle, the overall budget is going to be limited, the increase each year, then we need to think about how we're going to spend those dollars inside core, high priority, and lower priority type items so that we can all deliver, back to what I said in the first page, the balance of great schools, great services, great facilities, and a fair and appropriate and competitive tax rate. This is analysis we put together where we looked at what we know today going into budget season. We made some assumptions around the ground list. We assume that the ground list expands by 1%. Again, that's kitchens, bathrooms, pools, new cars. We assume the collection rate stays the same at 99.5%. We assume debt service goes up by 18%. Now, there was a dip last year, so that's bringing that back up, and we're going to term out some of our bond anticipation notes. And we assume that the investment earnings are about $2.7 million, down about 25% from what we budgeted last year, which would be down almost 50% from what we actually realized this year. So what does that mean? Based on those assumptions, if you look at these two graphics across the top, we looked at what are the increases in operating expenses and capital expenses that we can bear. And on the column on the right-hand side, on the left-hand side, is the amount of money we're able to use from our general fund. Last year, we used just over $3 million. So if you look in the middle of these two graphics, the top one being the overall tax levy, the total of tax dollars that we levy from all the residents of Darien, a 3.5% operating budget increase and capital budget increase, paired with a $2 million contribution from fund balance, would generate a 4.9% increase in the overall tax levy. Now that's up a little bit from what we talked about 3 or 4 weeks ago as we further adjusted some of our assumptions around bonding, interest rates, and so forth. And if you move to the second table below that, the second table on the page, that basically shows what happens to the mill rate. And you'll see it's the same set of assumptions, 3.5% increase in operating expenses and 3.5% increase in capital expenses, paired with a $2 million contribution from fund balance. That would equate to a 3.8% mill rate increase. Now, the reason we have a 4.9% tax levy increase, but only a 3.8% mill rate increase, is because the grand list, we're assuming it's growing. Again, some of the smaller projects, plus some of the larger ones that Steve talked about coming online. So as we've updated this just from a month ago, we're going to continue to track this. We're going to look at where our surpluses are coming in from last year. We're going to look at how the general fund is performing. We're going to look at the budgets that are put forward to us, both on the capital side and the operating side, and we'll continue to keep you all updated with this chart, and we'll work with our colleagues on the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Ed to help make sure in May or in April, when our board approves a budget to be brought in front of you all in May, it's something that's been well thought out, we've been very transparent about, you guys are very informed about, and you all can make an informed decision. I feel like, this is my 10th year on the Board of Finance, going on 18 years in terms of, serving on the finance role. And, a lot of times when the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education do their job in terms of putting together a budget, and it comes to our board and we review it, adjust it, increase, decrease, shift it, encourage them to push stuff to another year, and ultimately sort of bring it to the RTM for approval, 99% of the time that you all approve that. And I appreciate that, and I know that you're not just approving it because you're just come in and show up every time to say yes. Hopefully it's because the two operating boards and the Board of Finance have put a lot of work and time into it. We try to take feedback from you all, certainly on the finance and budget side, from Jack and his team there, try to take input throughout the entire budget process so that when we bring it to you, you've been able to see what we've done, why we've gotten there, why we've made some of the decisions that we've made, and ultimately when it comes in front of you, because you are ultimately the ultimate appropriating body of all dollars that we spend in this town, that it's in a package that you all will support. So I appreciate all the work that you guys have done in the past and will continue to do throughout this budget season. So with that, I'd like to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year and a safe holiday.
Thank you, Jim. Well, we got a full picture. We are just sort of starting the serious part of the budget process, and the committees will be involved in that, and you'll get your chance to participate in what you've just seen and just heard. But for now, it's time to go out and celebrate the holidays. I wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. We'll see you in the new year, and I will accept a motion to adjourn. Can I have a second, please? All rise, those in favor.